Hello world, I am Curtis Simpson, and this is the Jectives flip-through book review of the Ohno Book by James Edmondson. This is live. I will be flipping through every page of this book and trying to give you the best educated review and help you decide if this book is worth purchasing, worth borrowing from the library, or just watching this review and moving on with your life. So I am going to flip through the whole thing, but first let's start out by looking at the outside. This is a hardbound book. It's not the hardest book that I've ever had before. As you can see, there's quite a bit of flex to it. I don't think it's going to fall apart, but I would handle it with a little more care than, say, a textbook or something like that. The pages on the inside are matte. So let's just go ahead and flip to the middle here. They are a matte print, and they're very crisp. The paper is nice and white. It's got a nice texture to it, so I'm not going to have any problems at all reading this. Sometimes you get these design books and they have really glossy pages and you got to angle it and do all these weird things. Not the case with the Ohno book. Very nicely printed. Just a little softer than I would expect from a hardbound book. Let's go ahead and get into this. Who do I think this is for? I think this is for anyone who is a fan of Ohno Typeco, anyone who is interested in typography. Any aspiring typographer or type designers or existing type designers that just want to see how James handles things over at Ohno Typeco. Who is this not for? I don't think this is for someone who wants an introduction to typography. I think you'd probably be better off with something like Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton, or I don't also think that it's for someone that wants a workbook for type design, because this isn't going to be that. This is going to give you a lot of good information about type design, but it's not a workbook like Designing Type by Karen Chung. This is the first edition. It is printed in 2025. That's when it released. And I have some links in the description if you want to buy this. They are affiliate links, but there's one for bookshop.org, and there is one for Amazon as well. Nice little dedication here to his children. This is the table of contents. It's much like many other table of contents, but this one is particularly useful in terms of thinking about how this book is comprised. I would say there are 3 parts, but this is kind of like part 1, part 2, and then the appendix is part 3. You're going to start out with the tools, sketching, parameters, spacing, proofing, vectorizing. This is all kind of like giving you the pieces for how to design type. And then the process is like the second big chunk of this book, and that's going to be breaking down several of the typefaces that he has made at Ohno Typeco. And so we'll get into those, but you might be familiar with some of these if you're familiar with James Edmondson and Ohno Typeco. So part 1, part 2, and then, I mean, you could kind of do, maybe it's 4 parts. Like you could break these 3 into separate ones, but I really think there's a big part 1, a big part 2 with the process. Then he's got a final words and frequently asked questions, which is very useful and very nice. And then the letters. This one feels quite different from the rest of the book, but we'll get to that when we get to that. That is the one part where there is a little bit of like workbooky type stuff, but it's kind of compiled from like social media posts a few years ago. So we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's go ahead and get moving through this because I don't want to take up more time than I need to, but I do want to give you a nice thorough review. Like I said, we're going to be flipping through every single page in this book. So given all of that information, just to get this thing started, do I think you should buy this? I guess you can answer that at the end of this, but I think that if you watch the review and you think that it's good, I don't think that you'll regret your purchase. So I'll come back to that at the end. I am going to have a few small criticisms about the book, but do not let that cast a shadow over my overwhelming positive review here, because I am very positive on this book. I do think this is one of the better typography books that I've read, and it gives a lot of insights into a successful foundry and a successful type designer and his perspective on the industry and on type and type design. Forward by Rob Stenson. Very nice. It's the other thing that you're going to get with this book that I kind of skipped over here is you're going to get lots of seeds. So I came across tons and tons of designers and typefaces and stuff that were mentioned in this, and I had to write them all down because I would have spent weeks and weeks going through this book had I spent that time looking stuff up while I was doing it. These black pages right here are a very nice design throughout the book. They, you can see it kind of smeared onto this page. Maybe you can see that a little bit. These nice black pages are very nice because they do break up the sections very well. So if you're kind of looking for a section, you can kind of look for the black pages, and that's going to break it up for you pretty good. So I think that's a nice design decision, and it also showcases some more of his work. Introduction about James here. Sometimes I'm not going to necessarily say a lot. I'll just kind of flip through and let you see. This is an introduction. It kind of gives his backstory. He studied California College of the Arts. Then he went to the Netherlands for a year and studied at the Royal Academy of Arts in The Hague for the type media program. History of Ohno. He kind of talks about how he got into it. He started out selling some stuff on Future Fonts, launched Ohno around the same time. One of the things in here that we'll come back to is that he got some advice from a friend that says, right here, Marty Grasser, hopefully I'm saying that right, says, you got to come back to Earth. Marty, what are you talking about? You're type dude, you got to come back to Earth. So if you're not familiar with James Edmondson and Ohno Typeco, a lot of his typefaces are display typefaces. And that's one thing that that you'll see come up later on in the book is that he makes typefaces like the one you're looking at right here. This is Degular. And prior to making Degular and some of these other more usable sans serif typefaces, it was mostly display typefaces. And he got some criticism like, oh, I can only use your typefaces once. It'd be nice to use them more than once. Okay, so a big breaking page here. This is the tools section. There's one thing to note here on page 26. And it is that you shouldn't worry too much about what specific tools to use. This is something that I know if you are already a designer, you are probably already thinking about. What program should I use? Should I use Glyphs, RoboFonts, FontLab, FontForge? Should I use one of the new online in-browser ones like FontBob or Fontra? It doesn't really matter. And I think hearing that from James helps ease that anxiety about like trying to find the perfect tool right now. Focus on the craft, and I think that'll allow you to actually get started in this journey because if you're someone who's used to using design software, you're probably already wondering what software is the software to use. There are going to be some small pauses in this as I get drinks of water because when I record these ahead of time, I can stop and start and stop and start whenever I like. But as we're doing this live here, there are going to be some small pauses, and I'm sure I'll make some mistakes as well. Translation and expansion. This is one of the most important things to grasp in terms of the anatomy of type and how type is made. You don't have to only make typography with pens, but these two pens right here and this concept of translation and expansion are going to come up a bunch of times. So if you do buy this book, don't leave this page until you understand this concept. You can see there are going to be a lot of examples of his typefaces in here, and not just completed ones. He's going to have a lot of examples of in process when we get to the process section. This is the first gripe that I have with the book, page 31 here. We can see here we're in the middle of a sentence. The trick I learned from Christian Schwartz, who redrew Antique Olive from memory. To arrive at his typeface duplicate. This, if you're a creative, you're going to stop on this page and you're going to start looking at Ohno expansion, Ohno translation, Ohno expansion italic. Like you're going to start diving into this and trying to differentiate between expansion and translation, like we just talked about. Then you're going to get to this page and you're going to be like, wait, what were we talking about? I wouldn't pick this out if it was something that only came up once in the book. This is something that happens repeatedly. So as nice as these black pages are, as nice as the hierarchy is and the types are and stuff, this is very jarring and very distracting. I'll just go back to this real quick. These are important, and these will help you learn the translation and expansion if you didn't catch it the first time around, looking at this will help you quite a bit, I think. My second gripe in the book. There are times when he tells us about cool stuff, like he's talking about a cool typeface here that he saw in Valencia, then he doesn't show it to us. It's kind of hard to grasp these types of things. There are other sections where he does this, where he talks about, a different typeface or something, and then he doesn't show us that typeface or a certain glyph or a character, but then he doesn't show us that. I mean, I know we can go look it up on our phone or whatever, or go look it on your computer, but then you're pulled out of the book. So if there's ever a second edition, I think these are the two main things that I would like to see fixed. But once again, do not let that discourage you from buying the book. I think there's way too much good information here to worry about like losing your place or not seeing an example or something like that. There was a comment back there that I wanted to give you, and it said something along the lines of, similar inspiration plus similar tools equals similar results. And man, if that isn't like the absolute truth about design and type design and anything you see these days, if we are all soaking in the same stuff, if we're all using the same tools, things are going to start to look the same. And I think after reporting typography news for the last year, I've seen a lot of typefaces that look the same, and they're all kind of hopping on trends, and they're all using glyphs, and everybody just kind of arrives at the same place. This is another very nice thing. So if you don't know, James Edmondson has taught quite a few type workshops, classes, things like that. And the teacher in him, the educator in him, very much shines through in this book. He will sum things up for you. He will give you lists. He will give you very good direction. He will like preemptively tell you the wrong things that other students have done before, and give you direction based on that. Chapter 2, sketching. These chapters right here, they're good to break up and things like that. But like I said, I think of it more of like a part 1, all of these different like parts about creating the type itself until we get to process. So I'm not going to pause and talk about sketching and things like that, but I am going to point out some of the things that I found interesting, or things that I think are important for you if you do read the book. Design space, similar to translation and, oh gosh, I forgot already what it was. Expansion and translation. Understand what design space is before you move on. I'm not going to try to explain it now because I had to read this about 5 times before I grasp it. But it does come up later in the book. So if you do read it, if you purchase the book, make sure you understand this section right here before you move on. Some nice lettering, some stuff like that. He's got a lot of these interjected into the book, and they are welcomed very much. You could definitely flip through this book. That's the first thing I did when I got this, is just straight up flip through it to look at all of the beautiful typography and lettering, because he is clearly a master at both. You can see a little bit more here. I'm going to get a drink of water as I flip through these. You'll also start to recognize some of the typefaces in some of their earlier forms and some of their sketch forms, and some of the typefaces like these here, these emojis or dingbats. Some of these are in the typefaces. Some of these are even in the thumbnail. Some of these are in the final typefaces. So it's kind of fun to see these things, to see the sketches and stuff like that in the book if you are familiar with some of Ohno's typefaces. Also, I do have notes on my monitor, so if you if you see me moving my hands off and off the screen, I'm probably grabbing my mouse to go look at things. Number 46 here, or page 46, I apologize. There are some classic mistakes sections right here, and I think that once again the teacher in him shines through. This is a very good section. Staying zoomed in, looking, just looking at one glyph really big, drawing only the outline shapes, so not blacking them in, like not filling them in like this, just drawing the outline of the shape. And then lastly here, sketching in the order of the alphabet. You will learn if you're already a type designer, then you know this, but you will even learn in this book, but you'll definitely learn in other type design books, that you're kind of copying and pasting pieces. So you start with an O and an N, or an O and an H, capital O-H, a lowercase o, lowercase n, and you can expand those pretty much into most of the alphabet, and then you kind of build upon itself. So one of the mistakes there was going A to Z. Got some more nice sketches, lettering. These breaks are pretty nice too. They kind of let you read the content and then you go through it and kind of soak up some of the visuals. And I don't know, for me, this kind of stuff like motivates me to want to try my hand at this. I think that's one thing this book definitely does a good job of, is making you feel like it's possible for you to do this stuff too. He's very much has on his teacher's shoes, or his teacher hat, whatever you want to call it, the parameters. So this breaks down, I feel like this is very well organized: pin parameters, path parameters, and then it goes through the pin and path parameters. He likens this to building a house. Like, you don't go to the store and buy the walls and buy the floor. No, you learn all of the parameters of home construction, and then you can build a tiny home, like he says, or you can build a mansion. Once you understand the concepts of building a home, you can do any you want. Even a better one, I think, is this one right here. And this is a better analogy. He calls it a metaphor here, but I think this would be an analogy, since you're giving actual parallels. But he's got some guitar pedals here, and you can imagine kind of turning these knobs and taking it from Roman to italic, or clicking it to all caps. You can turn this knob from narrow to wide, and those are kind of the parameters of type, you know. So I feel like this is a nice metaphor to help you understand what the parameters actually are. Once again, teaching skills just constantly coming into play here. He's got these broken down into very good sections, and he does cover a lot of questions that a beginner would have, and that's because he's taught a lot of students, and you know, he can answer your questions before you have them. This was something kind of new for me. You know, you're probably familiar with a lot of these parameters, like the width, construction, the X height, proportions, ascenders, descenders. These are terms that you'll learn if you're a graphic designer and you've taken 1 or 2 type classes. But stroke endings is something I'd never necessarily thought about. Like, of course, we know like serif, sans serif, slab serif, stuff like that, but I never thought about them in terms of a parameter, because you can see this is the same in here, more or less, but it's got different stroke endings on it, and you can change it quite a bit just based on that. This is kind of an interesting breakdown as well, going from the optical sizes. I feel like he does a good job kind of explaining it and pulling everything from this chapter all together at once. Yeah, once again, just kind of breaking everything down. He does make a note here that I think is similar to grid systems, where he says like restrictions equal like creative constraints. If you learn the rules, then you know you can work within them, and it's much better than just going from a blank page. And it's also easier to learn the rules and then break them from there. If you don't know the rules or you don't have any foundation, you're just kind of going what you think is right. It's probably going to be pretty ugly, but you know, Godspeed if you choose not to. Spacing. Can you guess what he's going to emphasize here? This is something I've heard lots of times, even before reading this book, and that's how important spacing is. You can see a nice example of it right here. He has many, many nice examples of spacing, and this is a consistent topic that comes up through this book. From right now until the very last page, we'll be looking at spacing in this book. So I'm not going to point it out every single time, but you will notice it. There are 2 really important rules in this part, in this section here. Counter space equals letter space. What he means by that, obviously read the book, but this space here inside, this is the counter. Inside this D is a counter. These are the counters. Inside of the letters are the counters. This is the letter space right here in between them. See how this is really small, this is bigger, this is small, this is bigger. This looks ugly, right? This looks nice and clean. This is a topic that's going to come up again and again, especially when he does his process chapters in here. But that's one big rule. And the second one is the rule of thirds. And that is going to be looking at 3 letters at a time and spacing them out. This is kind of an example of something that breaks the rules, and he's considering the opposite here. But you can see letter spacing here. Once again, he points out that script and black letter are really good examples of that, you know, especially black letter for sure, because you can see the space in between the strokes of the M match the space between the M and the I. So you can see it. It's just like line, line, line. If you chopped off the top and bottom of this, it would just be like perfect lines. That's what he's recommending for the first rule. 3 at a time is the second one, where you're spacing these 3 at a time. Is the letter in the middle? Is the letter in the middle? These are 2 that are breaking the rules kind of though, because we're squishing them in nice and tight. Tracking this out does nothing for it. If you tracked this out, gosh, what a what a loss of an icon that would be. Proofing. This is something that I'd never actually heard of. I've heard of proofs, but not in the terms of type design. And this is something that, one of those things you don't know, you don't know. Obviously, if you have formal education in typography, this is probably going to be not new to you. Let me grab a drink of water and we'll jump into this one. So proofing. This is basically printing out your letters on actual paper, looking at them. Obviously, you could look at them on the screen, but I think you're going to be much better off if you print them. But putting your typography in positions where you need to solve problems. I'll let you read the book to to figure this out. But basically, he's saying, like, once you fix a problem, it shouldn't be in your proof anymore. And here are some examples of proofs. So you're going to print it out big. You're going to print out the alphabet real big so you can write all your notes next to the letters and stuff. And we'll see him doing that later on. Then you want to put it in body copy if it's supposed to be in body copy. Then you want to stick all of your letters next to all the other letters that you have designed so that you can see what the spacing and see what kind of problems might arise early on in the process. I do think that the proofing and stuff like that is one of the things that there's really good advice here, but it's probably not something that anyone is going to fully grasp until you've actually done it. Because we can look at this, we can kind of understand it, but I don't think that we'll necessarily understand the importance of it unless you actually do this, and then you get a feel for it. You know, it's like riding a bike or something. You can watch somebody ride a bike and you can understand it in concept, but you don't really know the feeling of it until you do it. That's with anything in life, I guess. But a lot of times in creative endeavors, we kind of tend to overestimate our own skill, I think, maybe. I'm not sure. Vectorizing, this is the next section. So we're finally getting to like some of the tools and stuff like that. Vectorizing, there's some good advice here as well. But once again, this isn't like a full like how-to book on using the tools and how to vectorize your type. But I do think that there are, that he's going to point you in the right direction with this. The 90-degree rule is definitely something that I was not aware of before getting into following typography deeply, because I've done a lot of illustrations and used the pen tool quite a bit, but this 90-degree rule of keeping your anchors at 90 degrees was something that I was not aware of. And as you get into more how-to books and type design, and you follow along with some of these things, you learn pretty quick that that is just one of their rules. There is another small gripe that I have right here. Drawing for interpolation. He's got just 2 sentences here about it, and it says, all of the techniques allow for easy editing, but the added benefit is that the shapes are already optimized for interpolation. That's a whole other can of worms, so I won't get into it now. I feel like anybody who reads that is immediately going to feel a little shortchanged, because he talks about the interpolation. You can design like a very thin stroke, and you can write a very bold stroke typeface, and then you can interpolate between the 2 fonts. But we don't understand why it's important. We don't understand anything about that, so you definitely have to look elsewhere. But like I said, this isn't like a how-to workbook about type design. This is more or less how he did it, and these are like important things that he wants to show to you. So we finished the first half, or the first like big part of the book, in my opinion. Process is the next one, and I think that, let me double check. Yeah, process is the next one, and I think that anybody who is into Ohno Typeco or into James Edmondson's work, even if you have no desire to become a type designer, I think that this big bulk of the book here is going to like really be worth purchasing the book anyway. So aspiring type designers, you're going to appreciate this front matter and the next matter. But like, if you just are a fan of Ohno Typeco's fonts, you will really enjoy these backstories and stuff like that. And I think that you will be motivated to at least take on some lettering, if not type design. But these process sections are really interesting. This is obviously, so each section, each time we get to one of these sections, you're going to see the typeface right there. So that's obviously, let me go ahead and get to the next one, Degular right there. I know that these might, to the naked eye, to the non-designer eye, if you show these one to your friends, they'll be like, oh, it's the same font. But we can see that these are two different ones. So you're going to see the font up top there. And he's basically going to break it down. Each one of them has this little section right here where he gives the year, the optical size, stroke endings, weights, and then there are some variables in here, but width and straight lines. And he's going to give you the backstory for it. He's going to show you how he started this one. It started out with these postcards for Chattanooga. He was going to a conference in Chattanooga, and he had the opportunity to have a little booth to sell stuff, and he didn't have anything yet, so he created these Chattanooga postcards. They were die cut, you could see through them, and this is just kind of where these things started. And the fun thing about this, the process part, is that you do get to see the mistakes. It would be really easy, and I think a lot of people online do this. You get to, a lot of people just want to show the wins. They don't want to show the losses. This shows you the direction that the font starts in, the direction that it goes in, the things that don't work, the things that do work. And I think that's one of the best parts about this book. It feels very honest. It feels very authentic. And I think that obviously here really sets the tone. It's almost a little depressing because it talks about how much work it is and how long it's going to take it. And he says, it's about 5% like creative design work, like in the beginning, and then like 95% production work, which he says that he loves that part. He loves to zone out, listen to music, just kind of design these typefaces. But for someone who isn't into that, I think it would be pretty agonizing to spend 95% of the time doing that production work and kind of solving problems and pushing vector points around. Let me check my notes. I don't want to miss anything here, but I also don't want to go too slow. So you can see here, I never thought this would be done. There's another theme that goes throughout this entire process section, and it's kind of like this. Before I get to that, each section, when you finish one of the fonts, is going to give you the breakdown of the full finished font, or not a breakdown, but a bunch of specimens, basically. So through the process here, we're seeing it being developed. We're seeing the things that didn't work, the things that do, the changes that he makes. Then you get a nice spread with the final fonts, the final typeface. And it's just nice to look through it and kind of know the little secrets about like, oh, what changed here, what changed there, like what made it, what didn't make it into it. And it's just a nice kind of eye candy to look at the end of that process. But the thing that I was going to say is that you learn pretty quickly from him that every decision you make can add hours or weeks or months or years to the process, because if you decide to do an italic, automatically you're doing twice as many fonts. You have to design twice as much because everything gets doubled. If you decide to do a bunch of alternates, then you have to do alternates for every single weight. If you want to do weights, you have to do every single character that already existed, every single glyph. So everything is weighing that balance there between like, do I want to add more stuff to it, or do I want to take more time? Let me just note here, Degular. So this is kind of one of the come back to earth things that we talked about earlier, where everything in here after this is going to get pretty wild. But this was the one that was like, okay, we need a regular Degular typeface. He got that from Kel Trofton, that word from Kel Trofton. But he also took this from the advice where he did a quick survey and asked people, and what's the worst thing? And someone said it would be great to be able to use an Ohno font more than once. Once again, we're seeing some of the process here, and we're seeing some of the beginnings of it. We're seeing in the different weights, and this one here, you can see that there were 8 weights to start with. It gets shrunk down to 7 because he got some advice that this wasn't. You couldn't tell the difference enough between these. Like you can see, like in here, if this one was next to that, you'd probably even see it more. But even maybe these two here, so taking that down from 8 to 7, and now that's just like a little secret you get to know later. This is one of the most like interesting things to me, and this is probably a little surprising because it looks super boring on the screen. But if we were to be able to zoom in on this, I'll try to show you close. Maybe it'll focus, maybe it won't. It's going to be kind of dark. you might be able to see there that this has opened and closed counters. So let me just show you right here. This one here is actually a little bigger. Get this on the screen again. These here are just slightly more at an angle like this, opening up that C, opening up the G, whereas these here are like Helvetica, where they're just straight across, just horizontal. And that's like, I don't know, that's something that I know that different typefaces have in the end result, but it's not something that I think about like when it's this developed being like, oh, let's just change the way that the terminals end. It seemed crazy to me that you could just do that after the font was already this far along. But that's just something else that he touches on, where it's like, if you design the typeface well, then you'll be able to make these kind of changes much more easily than if you're designing it incorrectly or doing it as he doesn't advise. So that's again, like kind of an inspiring, useful thing to know, because I think we probably get so worried about how hard it's going to be. And he kind of makes it seem like it's possible for anybody to do this. Here he was noting that old specimens look better. This is something we've talked about on the channel quite a few times. And that's because they used to have, metal print, and each size was like perfectly made for that size. Whereas now a lot of times fonts are made and in one optical size, and you kind of make it big, you make it small, and somewhere in the middle it probably looks good. But good typefaces have optical sizing, and you can see that like when they're made for smaller, he's got them spaced out more. There's some ink traps and stuff like that. When it's made for bigger sizes, at heavier weights, you can squeeze it in tighter. And this is another thing where it comes back to the counter space and the letter space, where we can see the space in between the letters. Needs to kind of match that, but when you're at the big sizes, kerning it in tight makes it just look nicer, especially for big sizes. Okay. And we are at the end of Degular there. Like I said, Degular is used throughout the book in the body copy, so you will see it quite a bit. Vulf mono. This band here, this was made for a band. Oh gosh, I can't even remember what the band's name is now. Vulf Records. Oh my gosh, am I not going to be able to? We'll find it again. Vulf something. This is his favorite band, and this comes up over and over and over. But this was a typeface that he made for that band. Vulfpeck, that's what it is. I apologize. Vulfpeck, Vulfpeck. And this also pulls back to the introduction by Rob Stenson. But this was a typeface that was inspired by the italic of the IBM Selectric. You can see it up there. Here are some of the initial sketches. So this was custom type. This was made for Vulfpeck. You could see he's less worried about making this work for everybody, and he's worried about this one client that's going to be using it and what they want. He did add some arrows and some musical notation and stuff like that to it. But this is the final result right here. Eight total styles. So you got 4 weights and 4 italics. And there it is in its final form. I'm going to get a drink of water while we sit on this page for a second. Next up is Casserole. So once again, we have our sections here. 2013, optical size, massive. He did in this section kind of flirt with the idea of making smaller sizes, but ended up not doing that. So it's made for massive size, that says right there. And it only comes in bold. So there's a really interesting story here about the typeface Davida. I'm not going to get into it here, but look it up if you're interested. This is the original right here. And that was the inspiration for Casserole. Casserole takes Davida and just like runs with it so much further. This one here, I actually think looks pretty good, but it didn't make the cut. He said that this paled in comparison. I think that this looks kind of cool though. It's got the ribbons on it. But yeah, this story right here of Davida is really interesting, kind of a little bit sad, but he took this and took it so much further, fixed the things about the typeface that he didn't like, and made a sans version of it, a flared version of it. He made like a black letter version of it. There ended up being six different styles for this one, and not six different weights, but actually six different styles like this. But I think something like this does make Casserole much more usable. This isn't going to be like a font review or anything today, but just in general, this you can see the craftsmanship and the thought process that goes into this, and creating six different styles for this is pretty wild. So there's the black letter version, and what is he calling this one here? The script one. So there's a script version, a black letter version, a flared serif, or a flared version, a sans version, and then the original with the ball terminals on there. One thing I want to note about this, so he's saying not a revival, it's a classic, blah, blah, blah. But he did want to still honor DaVita and the designers of it, and the designer named it after his son, and him and his son are both dead now. But the font lives on, and it's been evolved, and it's no longer called DaVita, and now it is Casserole. But I think that's one of the magical things about type design and typography in general, is it feels like we're carrying on this tradition. Even if you're not a type designer, if you just use type, if you are, if you're a designer, you're a graphic designer, you're a typographer, and you're making decisions to use certain typefaces, I feel like we are carrying on this tradition. And I don't know, it's something I've talked about before, so I'm not going to get into it too deep here, but I do like that he's carrying this typeface on, even though the original designer is dead, that his son that this was named after is dead now. The font still exists, and a piece of those people are still in this font and still live on. Next up, the process of Beastly. So this doesn't cover every single font that he's made, but it does cover a lot of the big ones. You know, we're getting the greatest hits here, at least as of 2025 when this book was printed. So you can see 2018 here. This one's got a few different optical sizes on it, 12 up to 72, slab serif, weights only black, contrast reverse, straight lines, yes. Here's where it started. Started from this Typographics 2017 logo. He did say, once again, so I'm telling you that he's very honest in this book. He said that this was originally put on t-shirts for about 20 bucks a pop at the conference, and he said it did not sell very well. But still, the combination of this and the Lou Ballin 100-year anniversary logo, here are all the ones that he did not go with. Once again, another, not even a failure. Like, you have to go through this process, but just showing all of the stuff that didn't make the cut. I don't know. It's real. This is real life. This is what it's really like to be a designer. You're going to have a bunch of stuff that you do that's not good, that doesn't cut it. And then eventually you break through and you get to, you get to the end result of a typeface like Beastly, or, something else that you find to be high quality. But I like to see that process. I like to see the failures, not just the wins. I like to see the wrong turns, the right turns, and seeing how things go. Here's a DJR font, and he's noting how he kind of like looked at these numbers and took inspiration and picked part of it, picked pieces from it, and gave him a little bit of direction. That's something you'll see repeated in this book as well, is having a good reference is great. But if you're going to do something truly weird like he does with a lot of his typefaces, there's not going to be, as he says, there's not going to be the ability to like look up the answer in the back of the book. And you can see here, he's got a bunch of different twos that end up going to that one, a bunch of different ends that end up being that one. So, playing around with the punctuation, deciding is it going to be bold, is it going to be not, like he ended up going with the thin one here. Obviously, you can see the little hearts next to it. But that's what I love most about this book, is seeing the process. Like, that's this entire big second portion of it. But seeing these typefaces that you've probably seen before, you probably recognize. Here are some proofs for this one. So you can see he doesn't just talk the talk, he's walking the walk here. And then you get to see these beautiful final results. But yeah, so I really do love the process section of this, and seeing the behind the scenes and seeing like an honest look at like what it's like to be a type designer. The manicules in this one are little beastly hands. There's this version here, and then there's also an outlined version that are really nice. This one here is Regrets, and this is complete opposite of everything else he's done, in the sense of a lot of the ones we've looked at so far are very heavy, very bold, and he wanted to see if he could design a typeface that was equally impactful and expressive, and do it with the thinnest possible strokes. There is a note in here that I really liked, and it was about insecure versus confident lines. This is something that I've seen talked about in cartooning or animation as well, having confident lines versus insecure lines. And you can see some of these here. And if we like, especially look at these O's and stuff, and then we come to this one, you can just feel the confidence coming through on this one, right? It feels much stronger, much more impactful. And I do think that comes with practice and stuff. Obviously, the first time you draw a letter, you're not going to be super confident about it. But once again, we're seeing some of the process here, as the section is titled, but this is regrets. And he's playing around with some Art Nouveau stuff, and you can see he's getting pretty wild with them. And this is another theme that he does. He kind of pushes things too far in one direction and then reels it back in. And similar to what we saw earlier, where he went from a more wild stylized version to a more tamed down one, this is something that he says that he finds much easier to do. Go from the stylized display version down to a more minimal, potentially text version of it. So getting rid of all of those extra swashes and ornamentation and breaking it down to this, rather than trying to go from the simple version and then making it more stylized. And that makes sense. That's something that even if you've never designed a typeface before, that's great advice, because I'm sure there are many people that try to do the opposite. And maybe some people do have success with doing the opposite as well. He did some ornamentation with this one as well. This is something that that he mentioned in a lot of the type specimens that he likes, a lot of them that were dealing with some Art Nouveau typography and stuff like that. He gave a new life to some of these that he found in the back of specimen books, and I'm sure some of these are completely original as well, but it looks pretty nice. Now we are on to Eckmannpsych. This was inspired by Eckmannskrift. You can see, once again, 2008. You can see all of the different things up there. Originally drawn by Otto Eckmann. So this is another seed or another rabbit hole to dive down that I was talking about before. And that's one of my favorite parts about any typography book, but especially a well-written typography book like this one. There are going to be things that maybe you've heard before. Like, I've heard of Eckmannskrift, but I don't know anything about Otto Eckmann. I don't know anything about the history of this. But he kind of talks how he went from here to here, and he makes it seem easy, rounded off this, pinched that. He makes it seem accessible, but I'm sure there was much more to it than that. And this whole thing started from, once again, Vulf creating these posters for a tour that he was going on, and you can see, or that the band was going on, and you can see their Vulf and then different things at different cities at the bottom here, but there are a bunch of different typefaces. And we can see Casserole there, we can see Hobo there, we can see some of these that that you're probably familiar with if you're familiar with Ohno Typeco. But this one here is Eckmannpsych. John Mayer also used this on some merchandise and an album cover. Let me check my notes. I don't want to miss anything. Oh, he did give a quick shout out here to Future Fonts. This typeface was actually originally released. There it is, Future Fonts right there. This was originally released for $6 on Future Fonts with only the capitals. Later, now it's been finished. It was finished the same year, but it had 3 optical sizes with a variable axis, lowercase, punctuation, and now it's $50. He did expand this into lowercase, and I really, really wish that he would have spent more time on it, because I think this has such a great texture to it. I think there's some more here, yeah. So I wish he would have talked more about the lowercase, because I think that it looks so nice. It looks so organic. It fits so perfectly, and it's not something that he needed to do. With a typeface like this, you could stick with all uppercase, but this just adds another dimension to it. I wish he would have spent just a tiny more time on that, because I really enjoy it. Next up is Swear, the Process of Swear 2020 here. This is the typeface right here. Like I mentioned before, each time you get to one of these sections, you're going to see the font at the top there. So this one here was inspired by a brush twist idea that he came to when he was at the Letratastic conference hosted by Jen Ramirez, who we've talked about a few times on the channel here when new releases came out of dual type. But again, This is another section that shows you that failure is not the end. He tried his hand at this, and he notes here that while the concept is very cool and while he really likes to see other people doing it here, he didn't really succeed at it. He decided, I'm never going to be a calligrapher. I'm never going to be able to do this. He tried it with some more traditional tools, with the broad nib pen, and he said, it didn't have the same character, but that's still a concept that he can carry forward. You can carry that forward even if you're not going to be amazing at it. And so I think that that's something else we can kind of draw from just in general as creatives. You can be inspired by something and do your own thing with it without being good at that particular thing that inspires you. There's some practical stuff here again, and you see the teacher coming through with the numbers here where X height increases, letter space increases, details get chunkier, contrast goes down. This is the steps from going from uppercase to lowercase, right? Usually I think about 4 things generally moving. Oh no, this is display to text. I apologize. So these are the 4 steps moving from a display face to a text face. But up here, he's showing some of the process here. Originally, he had these longer serifs on the A's there, the A and the V, but they create such bad, those longer serifs on the outside push the other letters away from you when you already have these big gaps, these big triangles. So he just took down and kind of had more of a flared serif on the outside of the V and the A, and then kept big serifs on the inside. So it makes you be able to space it a little bit nicer there. So it's nice to see these sort of solutions. You see the problem, you see the solution, it's real life, and it's coming from, a high quality, very accomplished, successful type designer. Oh, I almost missed something here. So here are the three different styles for this, 3 different, how would you say this? So this is the Roman, this is the italic, and this is italic backwards, so Silati. Originally, when this typeface, when swear, this is swear, right? Let me double check. Swear. When swear was released on Future Fonts, and he did the italics for it, it was this one right here, which he changed the name to Silati, which is italic backwards. He released this and he was like, in his brain, like, it's fine. Some italics can be crazy, but then he got feedback. People wanted to be able to use this. They wanted to have like real italics with it. So he said, fine. He designed the real italics for it, renamed this one italics backwards, Silati. And now it's got 3 different styles here. So you got the Roman, you got the italic, and then you've got this really wacky Silati version of it. And I think that that's another good lesson that you can learn from James here is like, even as accomplished as he is, as well, as much praise as Ohno typecode gets, he listens to the people that are going to be using the typefaces. We are designers. We are not artists. You don't just do things. I mean, you can just do things and you can just release them and not listen to anybody. But if you want to earn money for your craft, I think it's important to listen to your audience. Hobo Roccoco. So many of you probably know that James Edmondson famously created Hobo with a Beaux, which was a revival of Hobo, and probably the version that you see quite a bit now because it is, I think, objectively but subjectively a better version of Hobo. And then he made Hobo Roccoco. So this was inspired by Carlisle Roccoco. Let's see, there it is right there, Carlisle Roccoco. Another rabbit hole for me. I was not familiar with this designer. I was not familiar with this typeface. But it came from this right here. So I really like that he shows these things don't just come from nowhere. A lot of them come from like client work, different posters and things like that. And it came from this one little section right here. So he had Hobo that he had already designed. And then he added all these different, decorated versions of it. He has a better word for it, but I'm going to call it decorated because I can't remember what that was called. But this one right here where he's got Ward for Beatrice Ward there. He got a lot of praise for this one. And so he created it. And, in the end, he said it wasn't all that successful, but it is an incredibly beautiful font that gets a ton of recognition and a lot of, I think it's very difficult to see Hobo Roccoco. And we'll get to the end of it here in a second and show you the full thing. But I think it's very difficult to see this typeface and not kind of fall in love with it just for the craft of it. This right here is insane. Look at all this line work. Look at all these anchor points. Like, The one thing that he does note about this too is that like with most typefaces, with most font design, type design, you can take the pieces like we talked about earlier, and you can take like the O and turn it into an E. You can take the H, or you can take the I and turn it into an L. You can do these different things. With Hobo Roccoco, he needed to design every single glyph, every character individually, and no two are alike. You're not pulling from different pieces here. You can see the I here compared to the L there, and you can immediately see you're not just pulling the I from here and then slapping a baseline piece on the bottom of it. Each one of these is individually done. And we can see here the final glimpses of the final version here. He also created Roccoco borders for this. I think there were 25 different ones in the end of it. After he had finished this, after he released it, I think it said about a week after he released it, he got a message that this came out in 1954. It is called Olivia, and it's very similar in concept. Obviously, it doesn't look exactly the same, but in concept, it's very similar. He mentions like it's entirely possible that at some point he saw this and forgot about it, but just in general, he said the real lesson there is that there's nothing new under the sun. Even the wildest idea has potentially been thought of before. But here's the final version here, licensing agreement, and you can see this paired with the typical his regular Hobo that he designed. I think there's another. Yeah, here's some more. Here's some of the borders and stuff like that. But you're getting some of the glyphs up here where it says very. There's an M right there. Go look this one up if you are not familiar with it. Hobo Roccoco. It's a beautiful thing. Another thing to note about this is that this book it's more than the sum of its parts, but a lot of the parts in this have been released as essays and articles and videos online before. So if you look up the design of Hobo Roccoco, you will find an article that lists a lot of these, that shows a lot of these same graphics and has a lot of the same words and explanations and things like that. And it'll even have Olivia at the end of it. So if you want to go look this up, or go look up, if you want to go read and hear his voice and stuff like that a little bit more, this book is kind of a compilation of a lot of articles and teachings and stuff that he's put out before. So if this review, I'm giving you the best glimpse that I can at it, but if you are like, I'm still not convinced, just go search for him. Google his name and you will find articles. Go look up the Hobo Roccoco one, and you will be able to read essentially that section of the book just online. So after we finish the process, we get to FAQs and final words. I'm going to grab a drink of water and we will get into this section. So this here, like I said, he's an educator. It shines through this entire book, the way that he talks about problems before you'll probably ever encounter them. Here are questions that have been asked repeatedly from students that he always has to answer. So he put them in the book because it's very likely that we will have these same questions. I'm just going to read the headers for each one of these, but I am going to stop on one of them because it's way too good to pass up. So I'm going to read these. We'll just kind of flip through real quick. Not very graphic heavy. But it's very, very valuable. This section here is very, very valuable. So, what makes a good concept for a typeface? How faithful should a revival be? Great questions. You'll have to buy the book to read them, to read the answers. Should I add alternates or other features to my project? When do you give up on a project? I will tell you right now, his answer is basically never. But go ahead and buy the book so you can read it. What should be going on in my head as I work? This is the section that I'm going to read in full. Should we do it now? Should we get to the end? I don't want to forget. I'm just going to read it to you right now. I will have chapters in the book, so I'll have chapters in the video. If you're watching this in future, go ahead and skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. But I think this is one of the most important things in the book, and this sentiment, it goes throughout the entire book. So this is going to take a second, but I'm going to read a paragraph here and a paragraph on the next page. What should be going on in my head as I work? I have seen students cry. I have taught workshops where students go off to lunch and do not come back. I have seen students look around the room and feel terrible that their classmates seem to be doing a better job. I know because I've been that student too. As much as possible, speaking to yourself in the same way you'd encourage your best friend or even a child can give you the best shot at enjoying the work in the early stages. Celebrate all wins and never deprive anyone of a pat on the back. He continues. There are so many things to keep in mind while you're working on a typeface. With each character, you add more relationships With each character you add, more relationships are built and the intricacy of your system snowballs. It gets overwhelming, especially for beginners. For this reason, I think someone's first font should be a doable project that builds confidence. Maybe it's only 5 letters. Maybe it's not even a font at all. Maybe it's just a piece of lettering. Don't bite off more than you can chew, and remember that, as this American Life host, Ira Glass, has so elegantly articulated, in the beginning, your taste far exceeds your skill level. Just try to make every subsequent project a little bit better in some capacity. We are here to have fun after all. I think that's something that probably one of you needs to hear. So that's why I went ahead and read it. I think that is just incredible advice. And if that doesn't sell you on the book, I'm not sure what will. But what's your number one best tip for a good result? When is a project done? And then he switches from questions to just final thoughts. So he's got, before I go on here, he's got the business of type, the type community. This is supposed to be fun, a nice reminder. Doing a bold, very, very practical advice in here. Save as. This here basically is, like when you're a beginner, you're afraid to kind of like mess things up. You don't want to do anything weird because you don't want to like have to go back and redo stuff. Save as, do the weird thing, mess it up, break it. You have something to go back to. An argument for creative practice, working fast. And then here he makes a he makes a suggestion that we change the order of the alphabet for type designers, but this kind of gives you a preview of the order that you could work in for designing a typeface. Let's continue. You can see big black section. That means we're moving on to something next. This fourth final section here is the appendix. It is called the letters. And this is the one section of the book that I would say is more like a workbook, but you will notice if you read if you've read the first 209 pages of this book, you will notice the tone of this section shifts quite a bit. It's much more playful. It's much less serious. There are some good refreshers in here. When you get to this section here, it refreshes kind of a lot of things that he's taught here. But it is much less serious, and there are a lot of jokes in here. I'll be honest, they can get a little bit tiresome. These were originally made as like daily posts during the pandemic. A joke a day would be fine, but 26 jokes in a row as you read this, you're probably only gonna take 26 minutes to read this section. So it's just back to back to back to back to back. But maybe you love that. And if you're already a fan of Ohno Typeco, you probably know what you're getting into. Here, though, starts really, really practical advice about every single letter. So we've got A's. He's pointing out that the crossbar is not actually in the middle. Really high crossbars is going to make it ugly. And then he shows you his typefaces right here, 8 different A's, and shows you how this concept applies to the ones that he's actually made. It's going to go capital, lowercase, capital, lowercase. This is a joke that I will not forget, and I apologize. You probably will not forget it either. He calls this the butt crack. So he's talking about the B right here. He calls that a butt crack, and he's talking about how you need a little bit of space there. This one here is too filled in. He says, can't even get a finger in there. Those are the kind of jokes that you can look forward to in this section. But he does point out with each one of his characters or his typefaces here, you can see the different B's, and you can see there is a nice gap there in between the two bowls. I'm not going to call it a butt crack, but you will remember that, and you will remember hopefully to keep that space there. Very practical advice, like I said, but he just goes on and on through this. This is where we can see a little bit of how the font builds upon itself. So once you build the C, you can build the G, and then like the terminals of the C, G, and S are all the same. So he does kind of hint at some of these things, but this book isn't going to teach you the entirety of the ins and outs and stuff like that. But he'll show you things like the stem of the D and the B are basically the same in like a script. So you've got them right here. You can see those are the same there. You've got the swash there, the bottom of it. They both match. And even you got the serifs here with that first stroke. So there is some practical advice in here. I do think this section is probably going to be more practical for someone who has already tried their hand at type design. Obviously, go ahead and read this anyway, because it is fun. You could read this section without even reading the rest of the book. Like I said, this is completely separate. But I do think that this is something that would probably resonate a little bit better if you had already, if you're already a type designer, if you've already tried to design some typography, maybe even if you're a letterer, if you do lettering or sign painting. But yeah, there's a lot of really practical advice in here for someone who already has some concept of type design. Again, we're seeing the spacing. As promised, you see the spacing, the letter space, counter space principle applied again and again and again and again. Once again, he's showing you, you know, like the letter I builds the entire font. So like there's certain characters that he mentions, like pay attention to this one, make sure that it's done right, because you can expand this into everything else. And he also does point out some of the characters here that are going to have like awkward spaces, and gives you, you know, that might be a reason to read it ahead of time, because it's going to give you, you know, give you something to think about and already know how to solve the problem potentially. But I also think that this here section of the book, the letters section, is a good reference to just kind of go back to. If you're stuck on a letter, you could easily go look in here and maybe it's going to solve your problem. Here he notes like the lowercase k, a lot of beginners, they stick the arm of the K above the X height. So he's talking about that here. We see that later on with the lowercase t as well. I'll go a little bit faster through this section because I'm not going to touch on every single part of this. I will note here, I've never heard this term before, but he talks about these as teeth, like a sharp one tooth on top and two bottom teeth here. And he talks about how those teeth should be taking up the same amount of space and things like that. He also notes like the thin, thick when you're doing a serif. He's giving you some mistakes here. There's never a serif in the middle of the lowercase there. But these are mistakes that I'm sure many of us would make if we were just designing from memory without looking at any reference, without any education. Yeah, like I said, very practical advice in here, but it's not going to be the end all be all, but it is very nice. One note in here that you'll see with some of these is that he learned this from Eric van Blokland, who was his teacher at the Royal Academy of Arts in The Hague. And that is that, let me get the quote right. Let me see here. Shoot, I lost it. I'll think of it again. Oh no, like the bad situations should be the rule. Man, I need the real quote. I apologize. Difficult combinations. Here's the quote. Difficult combinations should be treated as the rule, not the exception. So when you're making the P and the T and you're thinking about how these letters are going to work together, or when you're designing the P or the T or any of these A's or V's that kind of space things out weird, think about it in the worst possible scenario. Don't think about it in the ideal scenario, because once this typeface is out of your hands, designers and typographers and, you know, normal people are going to stick these letters next to each other. So it needs to look good in any situation, especially the worst one. This is something that I'd never thought about before, but immediately makes sense. And he notes here that you can basically stick anything on the bottom right of a Q and it's going to read as a Q. So he's given us 5 different examples here, but that's definitely something that I've noticed. Even in typefaces that seem very, very similar, different Qs can just be thrown on there, and it, you know, you still always read it as a Q. Lowercase q, he's kind of making fun of this right here. He says, whoa, what the hell is this thing? Because when you're a kid, you learn to write that little tail on the Q, but typically the Q is a mirror of the P, you know, slightly altered. But the P, B, Q, and D are all like in that same family, and doing the straight line there on the Q is better for spacing, and it's also just a little bit easier to read. He notes several times the S is I've heard this before as well, the S is the most difficult character because it doesn't derive from anything else. And then he's showing you here, you know, like the S typically has a thick spine and then a thin upper and lower stroke on it. But then he immediately breaks the rules and shows you these here with the reverse contrast. So even though this looks nicer than this, the rule can be broken. So I'm sure someone could try to make something like this look nice. The other thing he notes here is the serifs. Serifs on an S go vertically, not horizontally. But, you know, learn the rules and then maybe you can break them. We're almost finishing up here. one thing I wanted to note, let me hope I didn't pass it here. I don't think I did. Oh, here's the T again. So putting the T is going to be lower. Right here he's saying what's going on here, but you don't necessarily know that that's the X height. It makes much more sense when you're next to a character. And if you've ever looked at a typeface, you can see right here the T is much lower than the B and the H. It typically is, I mean, almost always lower. Goes through some more beginner mistakes and stuff like that here, where you don't have equal stroke width on a serif view. You typically do like the thick and thin. Thick on the left, thin on the right, just like you would with a V, thick, thin. And this comes back to the translation expansion thing we talked about in the very beginning. And it doesn't necessarily matter if you like the rules or not. I mean, you could definitely break them at your own peril. But as Zuzana Lichko said, you know, we read best what we read most. And everyone is used to seeing the V with the thick stroke on the left. Everyone is used to seeing the U with the thick stroke on the left. If you don't do that, it's probably not going to read as you expect. Just reiterating here some of the copy paste that you're able to do. And I did miss the thing that I wanted to talk about, but it's okay. We'll move on. If you took any type design classes or typography classes in school, probably this is Cooper Black italic right here, and this is Garamond. And Cooper Black is, you know, is drawing inspiration from this Garamond right here, and the italic version. And I never would have thought that the two were related, but it's just a great reminder that like looking at references is fine. You know, look at them, do your own thing, but don't try to invent everything. Go look at how someone else has solved a problem, and then when you get to a point where you have to come up with a completely original solution, go ahead and do that. But there's no shame in going and looking at references. This is really cool right here. We saw something similar with Spinello recently that released from LiftType. But look, we made it to the end. Got some acknowledgments at the end of this. There he is right there, James Edmondson, and the final page. So, do I recommend this book? Yes, I recommend it to the people that I mentioned in the beginning. Anyone that is interested in Ohno Type Co., anyone that is interested in typography in general, and anyone that is an aspiring or existing type designer. I think you will get a lot of value out of this. I do have affiliate links linked in the description, so you can check those out if you want to buy it. I'm going to check chat now, and we'll see if there were any questions or comments. Oh shoot, Daryl, you got this a couple days ago. That's awesome. Said I'll have to watch the first half later. I just got this book a couple of days ago. Awesome. Yeah, I got this. I got this as a Christmas present, and I was reading a little bit at a time, and then I was like, I need to do this review. I've had this for over 3 months now. So I read it this weekend. I literally finished it today. I was like, I'm going to do the review live. We tried it out. I think it worked okay. ONG Studio is here, said someone recommended that and designing fonts by Ulrich Rausch when I asked for references on display typefaces. Daryl's commenting back to him, the Ulrich book is excellent. I bought a second copy and sent it to a friend. There you go, another recommendation, guys. Just a little chat back and forth. Yeah, okay, so I think that's going to be it for this book review. I will have chapters added to this. If you're watching this live, chapters will be added very soon. Thank you for watching. I have been Curtis Simpson, and this was the Jectives Live flip through book review of